My name is Jacques Rupnik. Welcome everybody to this panel entitled Can Change in Electoral Systems Offer a Cure for an Ailing Democracy? Well, such a question brings back memories of the time after 1989, or in fact at the very end of 1989, when the first discussions took place in this country about what would be the appropriate electoral system for Czechoslovak democracy after communism. And, well, already then there were different views on the subject. And the obvious thing was you go back to the electoral system you've had when Czechoslovakia had democracy before the war, and that was proportional representation. And that was a dominant view, that the only way after a totalitarian system for a society to reinvent itself would be proportional representation, because that allows every entity to establish its identity and its political identity in the political game. Later, Václav Havel came with ideas that maybe we should move towards a majoritarian system that would stabilize democracy, and others had views that we could combine the two systems. Anyway, so this debate about electoral system has a history in this part of Europe. What people in this part of Europe don't often fully understand is that how difficult it is to change electoral systems. Partly because electoral systems are highly political or politicized. Everybody, you know, the first question asked, whenever you come up with an idea to change the electoral system, first question asked is, who will benefit? And there you have part of the answer why it's so difficult to change it. Anyway, to address the theme of the panel, we have two distinguished speakers. Karel Janeček, who is well known in this country as a mathematician by training, businessman, philanthropist. And he has some very new and original ideas about how to change the electoral system, and he will make a presentation about it. But before that, we will hear from Marc Plattner, who is joining us, who came from Washington, D.C., and he's a vice president at the National Endowment for Democracy, and also the editor of the journal that you are familiar with, the Journal of Democracy, to which I had the honor of contributing in the past. So warm welcome to both of them, and maybe we will start with a more general picture about electoral systems and then move to the very specific proposal Karel Janeček has in mind. So, Marc,
thank you for that introduction, Jacques. Electoral systems are a subject of particular interest to many political scientists, and in the Journal of Democracy, we've published many articles on the subject. In fact, there's a whole subfield of political science dedicated to studying the different kinds of electoral systems and the ways in which, in combination with other features like the structure of the executive branch, the party system, and the presence or absence of federalism, they help to shape the landscape of democracy in any given country. I have to confess that I'm not an expert in this subfield, and it's a subfield that often requires a great deal of technical and even mathematical expertise, which is not my strong suit. But what I can do, what I've agreed to do, what the organizers asked me to do, is to sketch out some of the broader considerations that need to be kept in mind in thinking about alternative electoral systems, the goals they're intended to achieve, and how they interact with other aspects of a democratic system. I think it would be pretty much agreed that the basic goal of any electoral system is to translate the choice of the voters into a cohort of representatives that reflects the popular will. but there's no single way to do that. In fact, the world's democracies display a pretty bewildering variety of approaches to turning votes into parliamentary seats and in presidential systems into presidents, electoral winners. And none of these approaches can claim to be strictly neutral. They all have biases of one kind or another. That is, they tend to favor some criteria of democratic representation at the expense of others. And since these alternative systems give priority to different goals, and they're all goals that have some claim to democratic legitimacy, the choice among them is difficult and often requires painful trade-offs. To achieve one goal, you have to minimize what the system does to achieve a different goal. And the goal that's regarded by some observers as paramount is to have the allocation of seats in the legislature match the distribution of votes received by the various competing parties. That, I guess, was the old Czech system, as Jacques pointed out. It's a goal best served by proportional representation with votes cast for party lists. The system's known as, in shorthand as party list PR. And I believe it's still the most common electoral system today. Particularly in Europe, it tends to prevail. But even PR systems don't always produce a proportional result because if voting districts are smaller than nationwide, or if there's a minimal threshold, vote threshold needed for a party to gain any entrance into parliament, that will make some of the results disproportionate to the absolute number of votes. But I'd say the very fact that most PR systems are modified to include smaller voting districts and minimum thresholds of some kind indicates that there are other goals that those who design electoral systems consider of real importance. One is the accountability of representatives to the constituents who elected them. If you were just to have a nationwide PR system, you wouldn't have your own representative in the parliament who you could contact when there's a problem, or you could expect to take account of local interests. If there are no minimum thresholds, which used to be the case in Israel, for example, I believe, you can wind up with a proliferation of very small parties, leading to a degree of fragmentation that makes stable and coherent government difficult, and sometimes gives these small parties disproportionate influence in the forming of governing coalitions. So some of the Israeli religious parties, for that reason, had influence all out of proportion to the size of the vote they got, because they could tilt the balance between competing would-be coalitions. The second major family of electoral systems are known as plurality or majority systems, and they are more likely to promote the accountability of representatives to local constituents. And they also encourage the aggregation of narrowly based parties into a smaller number of more broadly based parties, which in turn is said to encourage more stable and durable governments. These are the virtues that are claimed by defenders of the so-called first-past-the-post system, which characterizes both the United States, but also Britain and many of its former colonies that follow what's referred to as the Westminster system. Now, the debate between proponents of proportional representation and champions of first-past-the-post is a very long-standing, and almost 25 years ago in the first issues of the Journal of Democracy, we featured articles on this debate. And there are strong arguments on each side. Supporters of PR rightly point out that in addition to its claim to achieve greater fairness in matching the allocation of seats to that of votes, it also makes it easier to require that a certain percentage of legislative seats be reserved for women or for ethnic minorities. Of course, not everyone considers that to be an advantage. But in a system like that of the US, where you have congressional candidates running in separate districts, it would be very hard to impose any kind of gender quota or ethnic or racial quota. Whereas with PR, you can enforce or at least try to get parties voluntarily to say a certain proportion of their list will be women or members of minorities. And critics of PR, though, point to the fact that it often gives an opening to extremist parties to get into the parliament with a relatively small proportion of the vote. Some even go so far as to blame the failure of the Weimar Republic on the fact that Germany in those days had PR, and also claim that it intensifies ethnic divisions in other places. I believe Belgium is an example of that. Anyway, so this controversy among scholars between the proponents of PR and first past the post is unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. And perhaps it's the division of opinion on this issue which explains why the fastest expanding category of electoral systems today is what are often called mixed systems. In other words, systems that try to get the benefit of both by, Germany is the prime example, that elect part of the legislature by majority vote within constituencies and the remainder by party list PR. The other big ongoing argument among political scientists is about which forms of electoral systems are best at promoting ethnic accommodation in ethnically divided societies. There's one school of scholars, the dean of which is a man named Aaron Liepard, who's a Dutch scholar but who taught for many years in California, in the United States. And his school is known as the consociationalists, who are in favor of PR elections and make the argument that if you have PR, all the even smaller ethnic groups will get representatives in the legislature, and then within it, you can work out power sharing arrangements and ensure that all the ethnic groups will feel they've had a say and they have some kind of representation. But another school, of which the most prominent political scientist is an American named Donald Horowitz, advocates instead systems like what's called the alternative vote that encourages ethnic groups to engage in negotiations and agreement on coalitional strategies, vote pooling strategies prior to elections. The alternative vote is used in Australia, a few other much smaller countries, and it's one of a number of systems that try to measure not just the first choice of voters among the candidates, but also their preferences among the second, third, fourth, fifth, however many there are. And what it requires voters to do is to rank the candidates in the order, their order of preference. So a 1 next to one candidate, a 2 next to another, and so on, in single-member districts. And then it redistributes the, I mean, if there's a candidate who's not in the top 2, it will take his voters, look at their second preferences, and add it to the votes that the candidates got as first preferences. This is not very easy to explain, but this procedure continues until some candidate, by amassing both first place votes, second place votes, if it comes to that third place votes, has a majority of the electorate. And one virtue of this is that it would enable a candidate who sort of may be everybody's second choice, and the person who gets the greatest number of first votes might be very negatively viewed by the rest of the electorate. It would allow this candidate, the widely accepted second choice, to actually defeat the first choice. Well, is that more democratic or less democratic? One can make the argument, I think, both ways. In any case, as Jacques mentioned, it's hard to win approval for changing an electoral system, especially one that's been long established, because it becomes interwoven with a country's other political institutions. And so there are all kinds of vested interests develop. Nonetheless, electoral system reform is easier to achieve than, for example, a change between parliamentary and presidential systems, which has been tried in a number of countries, but the Turks may be on their way to doing that if Erdogan, who's now been elected president, may be able to get constitutional changes to give him something more like the powers of a president in real presidential systems, but that's extremely hard to do. And a surprising number of countries have changed their electoral systems. The latest data I've seen is from 1993 to 2004, 27 countries, which is actually more than 1/8 of the world's countries, switched from one electoral system to another. And the changes went in various directions, but the most common were transfers either from a plurality majority system to a mixed system, or from PR, pure PR, to a mixed system. That shows how it's the mixed systems that have been gaining in popularity. But it's very difficult to predict what the outcome will be of altering a country's electoral system, precisely because it's so interdependent with other features of the political structure, and above all, the party system. Parties, after all, are in the business of trying to win elections, so they'll seek to adjust to any rule changes in the electoral system in ways that will increase their chances of victories. But if the incentives for the parties change, so will the contours of the choices that they offer to voters. They may choose different kind of candidates to run if the electoral system changes. So it's very hard to measure in advance the possible effects of electoral reform. Very few scholars, such as Liepard, are willing to claim that one particular system is simply the best. All the countries should adopt it. It's more common for scholars to say that the best system for any particular country will depend on a variety of historical and demographic factors. To take one very obvious example, a country with a significant religious or ethnic minority that feels discriminated against by the majority may be negatively affected by electoral rules that would be unproblematic in a relatively homogeneous country. And that's another reason why calculating the likely outcome of electoral reform is so hard, especially for outside observers like myself, who don't possess deep knowledge of a country's, in this case, the Czechs, politics, history, and culture. But I think we now will hear a very interesting proposal for a new system for Czechoslovakia, and I look forward to hearing it.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marc. Well, Marc gave us an overview of what electoral systems have been in the past, how they evolved, how they were combined. Now we're going to hear about proposal for the future. So that's something unusual, unexpected, and I think very interesting. So, Karel Janeček, the floor is yours. I understand you have a PowerPoint presentation, so...
it's being arranged.
It's being arranged, so wherever, on the screen over here.
Okay. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, thank you for the invitation. Thanks to Forum 2000 for the invitations. I'm very pleased to be able to present Democracy 2.1 here. 2.1 is a special number. 21 is a special number. We are in the 21st century, but there are more meanings to that, and I'll be happy to talk about in discussion as well. Let me consider what world we are living in now. We can see we are in historically unique times, times where we have information revolution, everybody can communicate. We have technologies. We have such great opportunities. Economy could have big reserves to feed everybody without any problem, in fact. And yet we are in big trouble. The democracy, but the democracy is, from many, according to many opinions, it has been failing. It has shown its weaknesses. Extremism has been rising, populism, bad, unjustified promises, and other things. So why is that? Why can we apply our knowledge, apply our brains, apply our wisdom to really make changes, to have a system, social system that is efficient, that works? Well, I believe, and many people do as well, that the only system that is long-term stable and efficient, or could be efficient, stable, is democracy. We cannot limit democracy in any way, because it will, in the end, it will result in trouble. It will be a way to hell if we start to limit democracy. And yet, at the same time, we are in a situation where democracy doesn't seem to work well. Well, let me offer you a tool that I believe actually solves this problem. It's a completely new tool. I found it in May last year, so it's a little bit 1 year old, or 1 year over 1 year old. And it is a tool that will significantly, qualitatively improve democracy, make it more efficient. So before we do that, I'd like to explain, or I'd like you to understand how it works in practice. So you will be able to make yourself a vote. Okay, so first please log in to this web page, D21 V1. V1 means that you have only one vote. So what are we doing? We are voting for 2 co-presidents of the world. So we, as a group of people present here, I mean, it can be done, of course, universally, but we, as a group of people, you are choosing one person out of the list of 21 names, and we will, by this vote, the standard first past the post vote, actually we will choose the 2 which have the most votes. This is the standard voting system, and in a moment I will explain to you how the democracy 2-1 works, and you will be able to make the same decision, same voting with the new system. So you can do the voting, and I will continue with our presentation. But please make the vote. We are also very interested with the results. And now let me explain to you an example of D21, how it works. And let's first make a very simple example with restaurants for you to understand. Very simple, simplified example, but shows well the point. So we are in a situation where we have 8 people from different countries that need to make a common decision which restaurant they choose. So 7 people, they choose, 8 people. 8 people, they choose out of 7 restaurants, okay? So the standard voting is that each person votes for 1 restaurant. That's the first past the post system. That's the most common, as was mentioned, is in the United States, for example, or Great Britain. So now we can see that each, and the people are from different countries, so each person votes for his or her country. So you can see the votes. Every restaurant has 1 vote, except 1 restaurant, which is McDonald's, fast food. And the reason why McDonald's wins, because McDonald's has two people that vote for McDonald's. Okay, could be Americans, but doesn't matter. Just 2 people vote for McDonald's. So what happens now, this situation shows that the standard voting system gives not only bad result, but it gives the worst possible result out of all combinations, and if we define the result as how people are happy. We can define more formally, we can define utility functions and the social utility. But nevertheless, it is clear that this is not good, because those 6 people are displeased. They would prefer any other restaurant at McDonald's except the 2 who voted for McDonald's. So now, how will the voting according to D21 work? So D21 offers more vote to people. So each person has not 1 but 2 votes. So consider, only 1 restaurant wins, but everybody can choose 2 restaurants. So now this is an example of the result. Okay, so obviously the result will be very much different. It is clear that because you as a Greek, you will be able to cast second vote, you will choose another restaurant as well. You will choose your second choice. You are not forced to, but most likely you will. The additional good option of D21 is also the so-called negative or minus vote. It is a possibility to choose to say not only what is your preference, but what is your anti-preference, what you do not want to. So let's see how a result could look like if we choose also minus vote. So you can choose 2 restaurants, give 1 vote to 1 restaurant, and you can also say who you do not want to. So now we can see that, well, there is a winner, a good restaurant, for example, Italian ones, but the McDonald's is actually negative. The total number of votes of McDonald's is negative. And this is not an artificial example. This is something that works also in practice, and I will, towards the end, I will show you an application in Czech parliamentary elections last year. Guess who had the total number of votes was negative? We had a party last year when we ran the Democracy 21 test experiment, and one party had the total number of negative votes, or the total number of votes was simply minus. Okay, I'll leave it towards the end. Maybe you get an idea who could that be. So that's an example for restaurants. Now. Also, please now, or during the talk, go to web page, now after the slash is V2, and choose Democracy 21 voting for the choice of the 2 of the co-presidents. Now, the Democracy 21 means that you have more votes than the winning candidates. That's the so-called effect of multiple votes. That's the most important feature of Democracy 21, not the minus vote. That's an additional very good feature, but the multiple votes is the crucial element. So now, in our game, you will be able, out of the 21 people, you will be able to choose up to 4. So you will be able to choose 4 people who should get your vote, 1 vote per 1 person, and you also will be able to use 1 minus vote. So plus 4 votes, you plus 1, and 1 minus 1. So please log in at your convenience, and let's run the test. So let me just, as a short introduction, explain to you how we got to that, how I found Democracy 2.1. In fact, I am a mathematician. I am not a politologist. At least I wasn't. And I studied mathematics. I get PhD from Carnegie University. And I succeeded by applying mathematical knowledge and thinking into financial markets. And so we, as a company, RJ, became very successful. In fact, perhaps if not one of the most successful traders in the world. And so we got these results, lucky enough. And we decided that we should, of course, use our money, use our fortune that we achieved for the good of the society. And the first I'd say, activity, or not first activity, but first more public or more general activity was when I started the Endowment for Support of Research and Science. It was in 2010 or 2009. Now the endowment has changed its name to Neuron. It has been, I believe, we can say that it's been very successful endowment in the Czech Republic, supporting scientists, giving impulses to scientists, giving grants. We call them impulses. Later then, because I became more interested in what was going on in the society, I could see how badly functioning the society is. In fact, I didn't see it. I could only see how much corruption there is in the Czech Republic. And I disliked it very much. I was upset about it, and I like to solve things that make me discomfort and that make me upset. So the idea was to start the anti-corruption endowment. The first idea was to give prizes to whistleblowers, to give prizes to people who are courageous, who have brave, and who run only risk by doing something against corruption. They have only downside they would have no upside. So we decided to give them prizes to support the courage. The anti-corruption endowment does a lot more now, but that's another topic. No, nevertheless, after function of anti-corruption endowment, after about 1 year, we also got involved in discussing politics with politicians, with members of parliament. We were pressing transparency, and there I could see that the fight against corruption, being extremely important, is still not the only, or it's not a solution to our problem, to this problem of the society. We need to go to the roots of the problem. And the roots of the problem, in my opinion, I'm very certain about it, but of course you can think about it, how important it is, but my view is that the very important factor is the choice of leaders. People who represent our society, people who are not only in the government, but also people who are members of the parliament who pass laws. We could see it. I could see it from my own experience, because we had clear transparency proposals. There should be no question about that. But there was just an argument against artificial arguments because they didn't want it, because it wasn't to their advantage. And that made me to think about voting system, how to improve it, how to make voting more efficient and reasonable. And it was actually. It is a relatively easy case study in the Czech Republic, because the voting system in the Czech Republic is very stupid. So through this, I went through the different discussions and created a voting system. Previous version was 2 seats, 2 votes. But then, as I said, over a year ago in May, I got the idea of the effect of multiple votes. So let me describe a case study for the Czech Republic now. But I would like to stress, Democracy 2.1 is generally applicable, not only for the Czech Republic. I believe that, and yes, it will be applied in other countries and where I hope actually over time could be in many countries, or maybe all countries, almost all countries. So the proposal of the voting system is 2-seat voting districts. That's one important factor. That's an older idea. Well, why 2 seats? Because if there is only 1-seat voting district, then we are getting to the majority voting system with all its disadvantages and unfairness. With 2 seats, there is already a big difference, because 2 people win per voting region. So that's an older idea, important one. Now, in application, this is general thing, 2 seats. It could be generalized. We could have, in fact, more. We could have 3 seats, etc. The application for the Czech Republic is 81 voting districts. So it would be in total 2 times 21, which is 162 members of parliament. And now the important feature of Democracy 2.1 is 4 votes. This is as in the application, as we ask you to vote for the 2 co-presidents of the world. So the same way it would be for the parliament, 2 seats, and each person has 4 votes. So how does it work? Well, you have a list of 21 or maybe 30 names, and you can choose 4 names. 1 vote per 1 candidate. You don't have to use all 4 votes, but you can. It's your option. And the additional option, a very good feature, but not necessary anymore for the system to be extremely strong and powerful, is the minus vote, saying you do not want to. let me explain the advantages of D21. Why is it so powerful? Yeah, I still haven't explained the logic behind yet. So first of all, D21 gives every voter, the guy with thinking guy, gives every person an incentive to think, to make wiser decisions. You will have more votes, you will have more to say, you have an incentive to become more engaged. D21, in fact, we can say that D21 joins the advantages of proportional and majority voting systems. The advantage of majority voting system is direct accountability of representatives to their voters. And D21 is simple. It is not difficult at all. In fact, it is much simpler than most voting systems, like, for example, in the Czech Republic. The Czech voting system is so confusing, complicated don't method, etc., and even more confusing for local elections that nobody actually understands it. Or not nobody, but most voters do not understand it. So D21 is very simple, and I will show you a result of our test that people were not confused at all how to use D21, even though it may look like that it's complicated to have more votes. No. You can simply choose 4 people. So it is simple and it is transparent. That's very important. What are the other important effects of D21? So first of all, it gives voters the option to choose according to both their heart and brain. It's not, you are not forced to choose the lesser evil, which is in the current voting system. Causing also the disgust of people with democracy. I know that many people in the Czech Republic do not go to vote because they do not want to give their vote to a political party that's corrupt anyway. So they do not want to choose the lesser evil. So they are discouraged. With D21, we will attract voting participation because people will be able to express themselves. They will not need to do compromises. And if you think about the minus vote, that would be a magnet for people to come to vote because they can say who they do not want to. With D21, you do not need to give a blank check to a political party. Situation in the Czech Republic. Long list of names, hidden corruptors in the list of political parties. Voters have no option than choose a political party, even though they dislike many of the names. They just give a blank check. The political party makes all the decisions and the voter is weak. D21 has a big advantage over majority voting system. Not only that it is representative, it will offer our representation and fairness, but also that it gives the voter the ability to say, just because instead of one word, to say the whole sentence. Much more information is being given from the voter to the system, let's say. And people vote for specific candidates, yes, and more of them. That's a big advantage. Now, there's still probably it looks good, looks that it should increase voting participation, it has advantages, it should perhaps improve democracy, but now the main point, why is it 2.1, why is it version of democracy 2.1, not 1.2 or 1.0? It's a qualitative change. Why there is the qualitative change in democracy? And that I will explain now. The situation is that democracy 2.1 strengthens democracy, strengthens the democratic part of the political spectrum. It lessens the advantage of let's say, extremist parties, of parties that do not have consensus. It weakens them and it strengthens parties that appeal to a wide cross-section of voters. And why is that? Well, consider a voter of an extremist party. Could be a fascist party. So because we have 2-seat voting districts, each party will have no more than 2 candidates, either 1 or 2. And if the extremist party is strong, they can have 2 candidates. So what will a voter of an extremist party do? Well, the voter will certainly choose 2 representatives of this party, so it's 2 votes. And what will such a voter do with the other 2 votes? What would you expect? Voter of an extremist party. Well, well, it's not against. Now we are only talking for the explanation effect multiple votes. So we have 4 votes, okay? So the voter of the extremist party will use 2 votes for them and is unlikely to use the other 2 votes because he doesn't have a second choice. A fascist voter of the fascist party does not want any other. They just want the extremists. Situation is similar with a voter of a populistic or a party that just promises nonsense. Now let's talk about the engaged voter of the democratic political spectrum. So what will such a voter do? So the voter may have his or her favorite party, will use 2 votes for the 2 candidates, and is likely, especially if it's engaged democratic voter, is likely to choose the other 2 votes for somebody else, for another party. So we are getting a result that engaged democratic voter chooses 4 votes, has a strength of 4, while a voter of an extremist, uncooperative party uses 2 votes only. So we are getting a situation as if we double the number of engaged democratic voters and run regular elections. And let me stress here that we are not judging, we are not saying which party is extremist or which is democratic. No, it is an implicit feature of the system. And this effect of multiple votes is the main strength, is the qualitative change. So now let me tell you some results from data, from experimental data that we ran last year during Czech parliamentary elections. We ran an experiment that people would be voting, people who went who poll out votes, so people voted and they were asked by a questionnaire to fill in questionnaire to vote according to D21. So first thing is, people understood it. Out of the 2,500 respondents, there was only like 30 or 29 or 31 invalid ballots. So people had no problem understanding that. Now, the results were, according to my expectations, because I am a realist, so many people would think that, that would be pessimistic, but actually the results confirmed the theory that I just said. In fact, the results were better in several aspects. One big aspect, which I will show you now. So first of all, it turned out that 34%, almost 34% of voters use all 4 votes. So it wasn't the case that people would just vote for their party and that's it. And that was actually the objection of many politologists, of some politologists, not many, that people are just blind, they just vote for party and that's it. No, more than a third of people voted, use all 4 votes. So that was a very good result. And now if we look at the distribution of the party preferences, so the first on the right side, so less than 40% of people voted just for their party. Okay, so we can see that 60% of people voted also for another party than their preference during the elections, and in fact, we have the statistics here that almost 10% of people, 9.6% of people, used 4 votes and voted for somebody else and did not vote for the candidate of their party. So what does it mean? Well, we have, for example, voters of top 09. So a voter of top 09 would go take the test of D21, and he would not choose any of the people, of the 2 people of their party. They would choose other candidates from other parties. To explain to you why, well, because when we were running the test, from the long list of names, for D21 we would always choose the 2 names, the first 2 candidates, and people were voting among the first 2 candidates. So what that meant that some people wanted a party, they wanted people who were in the middle of the list, but they didn't like the first 2 names. And this happened quite often. That was a surprise for me. I didn't expect that much. Well, and who would be an example of such a, well, we had this 10%. Well, the 10%, as I mentioned, top 09 voters, for example. So this is an interesting result. People were distinguishing. They were distinguishing among candidates. So Schwarzenberg, for example, Karel Schwarzenberg was the winner. He got the most plus votes. And at the same time, from the same party, Mr. Kalousek was the total loser who got the least votes. Actually, his total count was negative. In fact, he was the only one who could compete with communists. Okay, so Kalousek was a competitor of communists from the same party. And so people who were, for example, voting for Středočeský kraj, where Kalousek was the #1 candidate, would often vote the voters of top 09 would not choose their leaders, their candidates. Now, this has been a political application, I have explained. But the important thing is that D21 is very universal. It is not just for politics. It can be used for all kinds of choices. We have seen the restaurants. Okay, well, you recall, standard first past the post was very bad. Now, with multiple vote effect, the result was much better, and in fact was one of the good results from total social utility point of view. But it's not just restaurants. We can have application to municipalities to work, to business. Well, so imagine that you are a CEO and you are a vice CEO. So if you are a vice CEO, you want of a big company, you want to collect information for your people. You can ask questionnaires, you can ask them different ways, but it's not very efficient. And there is a much efficient way to ask to get results. And it is again D21, where people can vote on different projects in a company. It doesn't have to be just a company. It can be municipalities. Communities. As a community, you can decide what you prefer, what you do not prefer. One of the great applications is participatory budgeting. That's one of the features that we have been discussing, opening the topic with several think tanks in the United States, and we will be running tests in different applications, in different cases around the world for participatory budgeting. If people can really make by choice, they can express themselves well, it will increase participation in local decisions. So here we are offering a tool that's not only for political applications, even though I consider the political applications to be the most important to improve at least, and perhaps even I would almost even say save democracy, because we are in troubles. So this is to me is the most important application, but it's not the only one. There are many other applications as well. So now I would like to ask you I would like to show you the results of our voting. Do we have the results? I hope you voted, so we can then, who will be the president. So conventional system, single vote. You can see the Angela Merkel was the winner, Dalai Lama was second, Karl Bildt was third. And with D21, the difference, the order is different. So here you can see different. Now, of course, all of you can judge what is better, yes. But the fact is that apparently Angela Merkel is less appealing to a wider public. It is more a closer group of people would vote for Angela Merkel. And here we have the total results. Okay, so. Yes, you can then after the we will publish the results, and you can see yourself how it works. Now, what might be interesting also to see the minus votes. If we can see who is at the end, well, you can see 8 minus votes Vladimir Putin, 11 minus votes Korean representative. While without the minus vote, Stephen Hawking got 0, unfortunately as well. But I would definitely prefer Stephen Hawking compared to some other of these. So another statistics here, yes, so Kim Jong-un, whatever is his name, got the greatest number of minus votes, and Karel got the greatest number of plus votes. So that has been a small test, and please, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you could consider, you could see the meaning, the strengths of D21. I'll be happy for you to look at the webpage, which I will show in a moment. But let's say this simple idea. Let your heart say yes, or in fact, you can say more yes with your heart, and let your brain say both yes and no. So we are in a situation where we want to say multiple yes, more yes we want to say, and perhaps we sometimes want to be able to say no as well. And I would like to ask you, if you believe that this idea is sound, makes sense, please talk to, after the talk, please talk to me or to my colleagues, and we'll be happy to keep in contact, and perhaps you can find applications in your organization or community to test, to implement D21, or of course it is very important to spread the knowledge, spread the information, because well, what is the obstacle of application of a tool like D21? It is not the function or the logic. The obstacle is information. If people do not know about it, or if too few people know about it, then it's a problem. And our goal is to implement D21 globally and very soon, within a few years. So please let us help democracy to take a big step forward, and in as a recognition to Václav Havel, democracy being really the right tool for people. And so here is the web page, democracy21cz, democracy21.info, and yes, let's hope and see that we are approaching sun with our work. Thank you.
Well, we are approaching the sun. I don't know. We are approaching 6:30, and time to reflect on what we've been presented. So I understand with your heart you voted for Angela, and with your brain for Carl Bildt. Mm-hmm. Interesting thought. I think that the proposal tries to address some crucial ills of our democracies today. One is political participation, and what we could discuss is whether it does that or not. And maybe Marc Plattner will have a take on that. I mean, one claim, as I understand it, is that it would increase political participation, voting participation. That in itself would be a major achievement, because we've seen over the years, let's say over the last 30 years, or the last quarter of a century, certainly a decline in political participation in most Western democracies. So that in itself is a very serious issue, and if you find a device to counter that, that may be indeed worth considering. The other claim is diminish the influence of extremism and extremist parties. Well, that in itself, most of us, middle-of-the-road liberal Democrats, would actually welcome that. But how do you deliver that? Because how would your voting system achieve that in a context where we see populist parties gaining grounds, and the negative voting, may not go against extremists? Nowadays, a lot of the negative vote would go to the mainstream part. I mean, mainstream figures, because they are being disliked. I mean, if you look at Italy, the way Pepe Grillo managed to get, you know, a third of the vote or something like that in a very swift campaign and simply, yeah, negative targeting of the political leaders in place. So, and third question is, you know, to understand you have 4 votes, you know, and you seem to say this would be no problem for most voters, at least from the tests you've done. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm still to be convinced that, you know, giving people 4 votes will not create confusion with the ballot box. We know how difficult it is to get people use properly ballot box. You have a lot of wasted votes. Anyway, these are some of my questions first to you, and maybe Marc Plattner will have his own comments or questions to you.
Well, one question I have would be about the negative vote. It seems to me, and again, that might work well in a country that has doesn't have significant religious or ethnic minorities, but one could see how in a country that did, it would be used by prejudiced members of the majority to make sure that the minority candidates never got into the legislature.
Yes, that's a very good one. I stress that it's an optional feature of D21. The negative minus vote as the good advantage of cleaning out the situation, like from corruption, like in the Czech Republic. That would help. It is not universally applicable, though. It is applicable with country with, let's say, a uniform distribution, but with country where you would have a religious minority, for example, it would not be applicable. Yeah. So as we, of course. Not, I'd say, okay, let me phrase that perhaps D21 is best for every country, but a different version of D21. so with the minus, most certainly not for religious minorities. Yes. And if I can ask you a question, so if you would please repeat them afterwards. But I remember
one was about participation. You know, what makes you think? Well, I mean, would the idea of giving you a negative vote, would that increase the turnout?
Well,
is that the idea?
Certainly, if we have the negative vote, then I certainly believe that it will hugely increase participation, because there are many people who would like to go and give the minus vote to Kalousek. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just go there to use it. Yeah, that's motivational. But even without the minus vote, look at the situation where people go and they really need to vote less for evil. They have a list of political parties. They dislike them all. They like this guy from this party, another here, but they just do not want to do it. Or maybe there are people who would like to vote for a small party, but the party has no chance, so they do not go to vote at all. Now here you have multiple votes, so you can choose your best preference. And also you can choose what seems to be a relatively good candidate, a relatively good, strong candidate. Let me I haven't mentioned statistics, statistical results from our test. We had, the communists had 15 points in regular elections. Just with the effect of multiple votes, they went from 15% to 9%. If you added minus 1, they went to negative. And at the same time, Green Party would be a recipient of the second choice. So it went from 3% to over 6 or to 6%. Just in the test, without counting down for the seats. So this shows that like a party that's perhaps small, and that's not that would be the hard choice, will strengthen probably, because it will receive the other votes.
Oh, well, interesting. Well, we could carry on like that, but maybe we should turn to the audience and see what questions you have.
It's a really great idea to make different systems.
Maybe you can wait for the mic so everybody can hear you.
Thank you. This weekend, we have local elections in Prague, in the whole Czech Republic. And in the local, we have the multiple choice, as you said, in your system. And for example, here in Prague, we had 1,849 candidates for 65 seats. People had choice to make a cross. During, we had 45, I think, political parties candidating here, and 10%, more than 10% people, less than in 210, came to elections. Why so?
Why so? Okay, so good that you reminded us. We had just had elections, and we ran very extensive research or experiment for the Czech elections, or 8,500 respondents. We tested in Senate elections in 12 districts, and we also used for the local elections. So what you are saying, the example of the system in local elections is one of the most I'd say stupid systems. And it's intentionally stupid. It's not just by chance. The reason why it's intentionally stupid, it gives people so-called option that you can cross different names, but in reality, it doesn't have an effect at all. It's just a manipulation of people that so that they can think that they can do something. In reality, they cannot, because we can probably we don't need to go into detail. It has a tiny effect. It's practically non-effect. It's just completely pointless. And politologists know it. They mention it, they talk about it, but it's just there. And I think that that's a strategy of our political representatives to manipulate people. Or I don't see any other explanation. So. Why don't people participate? Indeed, because it's not. Of course, the elections are perhaps not as important as the parliamentary elections, but their vote doesn't really count. Yeah, you can. The best strategy is to choose party, and that's it. That's pretty much the best rational strategy. When I went to vote, I didn't choose the crossing. I just choose one party, because it's the way the system works. It doesn't make sense otherwise. Yeah, so that's. Yeah. And also here you have again a party and a long list of candidates. With D21 you will have small districts, two seats, meaning there might be 21, 25 candidates. So it's a big difference if you choose between among 25 names rather than choosing across I don't know, hundreds of names. Yeah. Even if the system was reasonable, which is not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Lenka Homolkova, and I represent International Foundation for Electoral Systems. And thank you very much for interesting presentation. And I have one question, actually, whether you have had a chance to test or whether you have any idea how this D21 system would affect the participation of women in elected bodies.
Yes. Well, participation. You mean like the voters or the? I think that there is a very good option hidden in D21, because you have 2 seats per voting district. So there might be a political party that wants to enhance the gender equality and say that for example, the rule of the party is that always one of the two candidates is a woman. So that's an additional option for parties, and it might actually push the gender equality in the sense. It should not be a rule of the voting system, but it can be a rule of the political party. Yes, and I mean, I don't. There is. I stated that there would be increased voting participation, but that's from the logic of the. It's not anything that we could have tested. It's not possible.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you want to?
Hi, I'm a student from America who's actually studying in Prague. And my question is, you said that the biggest obstacle in D21 is not its logic or its functioning, which I trust because you're a mathematician.
Yeah, but that's not the reason.
No, but that the biggest obstacle is knowledge and educating people about the system. So I guess my question is, how are you going to convince people that it would work? Like, you can run tests like this all the time, but until in actuality they're given a situation that shows that it is positive, and people are going to have an opinion whether it's positive.
So the one, you mean like for implementation?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so that needs to be, okay, so the strategy for, that's yet a little bit different topic, but I try to be brief. We want to show the strengths of D21 through, in the first run, through non-political applications. And as the knowledge becomes more and more common, then we will have strong arguments, and we already do, but we will have more strong arguments to go to, let's say, progressive countries or perhaps progressive municipalities, or perhaps progressive states in the US could be, because they have their local laws like California, and they could try to implement D21. So as soon as it gets politically implemented in a few places, then it's a rolling that goes on. I personally would like to implement D21 first in the Czech Republic for parliamentary elections. But the strategy is the same. There is no change in strategy. We need to get the case studies. We need to get international support. And if it works out, I will try to receive political order from people, from the public, so that the public wants it. So I will try, I've already gone through some discussion traveling through the Czech Republic, and I might do it again. We call it positive evolution, so there might be a second round in order to get order of the public for the support of the system. And we'll see, and to me, the best alternative would be for the Czech Republic to be first. But even if it's not, it's...
in the Czech Republic, can localities
for the parliament
have their own system for local offices? Not for local?
No. And it's the same. And
so you can't experiment the way you can in the United States?
Yes, the United States is good for experimentation. It doesn't have to be United States. It can be other countries. We have, like Estonia is a very progressive country, etc. So.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Andrea Karlova. Well, I would, you actually, your experiment showed the one with Mr. Kalousek and the one with Mr. Schwarzenberg showed a rather sort of interesting question, because I don't know if everyone is from Czech Republic, and I'm not sure if everyone knows that Mr. Kalousek has been a Minister of Finance for a very long time of the Czech Republic. So obviously the question would be, well, if I'm a politician and I would like to stay at power for a certain time, probably the Ministry of Finance might not be the best job to take, because if I need to increase taxes, probably I'm completely gonna lose it in the next elections. So the question comes like that. Wouldn't basically the sort of system, when I have got small communities which are going to choose the representatives, wouldn't it basically lead to the fact that the politicians would be a bit of scared of doing strong decisions just for the sake to make it in the next election period?
No, I mean...
And increasing the populism, of course, because the populism would be working on this... I mean, it's just a, you know, hypothetical question.
Actually, it's exactly the opposite. But let me... First, Kalousek, why was he the winner in the negative votes? It's not because he was Minister of Finance. In fact, Kalousek was decreasing taxes, right? It was right with government. But Kalousek is being considered as a corrupter, as a very famous corrupter. So that's the reason. And in fact, there are good proofs that it is indeed the case. So it's how can a person like Kalousek be in the power? Well, because of the anonymous ballots, because political party decides, not people. So, but nevertheless, to your question. It's actually the opposite. If you have somebody who is populistic, promising lies, trying to bribe public with promises. So now let's imagine a voter of such a party of like Paroubek or somebody like that. So the guy has 2 seats. The party has 2 seats for the voting districts, and the voter goes uses the 2 votes. The let's say very unengaged, very not very. I don't want to say stupid, but not just a voter who doesn't care at all, just listens to some promises. So such a person is going to use 2 votes and is similar as the extremists, but from a different reason, completely different reason, and is unlikely to use the other two votes or uses them randomly across the political spectrum. So from this point of view, negative effect of such a voter is again 2 compared to 4 votes of an engaged democratic voter. Now, that's a comparison to the current voting system, right? Because populism and promises, lame promises, are here everywhere. And the argument is that lame promises become weaker, that manipulating voters will become more expensive with D21 compared to the standard system. You could argue that a minus vote could be discouraging from strong actions. That would probably could perhaps make more sense. Yeah. The test that we have run has not shown that. In fact, the test that we ran last year, and also this, according to this election, we already saw some very preliminary results, that people would give the minus votes to indeed those people they do not like. So again, communists would be big winners of the minus vote. It would not be the case that people would use minus vote to cross each other candidates or to cross out personalities. So that's the statistics, and again, nevertheless, I'd like to argue that I'd like to stress that the principal component of the qualitative improvement of democracy is the effect of multiple votes, because not just the minus vote, not the minus voting. The minus vote is symmetric for the good and bad side. So the minus vote is might be very used and applicable, especially in cases where there is a lot of things to clean, like countries with a lot of corruption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this idea of the minus, the negative vote, yeah, it works in the anti-corruption situations, and that's of course a very important part of the world. So big issue indeed. But as Marc said, what about the negative vote? You know, for minorities, you know, is it a way to get?
As I say, it's not applicable there.
And secondly, now it has been said, what about leaders who take unpopular measures, and you want to strike out that kind of unpopularity. Yes. So there you have the pros and cons of the... Yeah, Marc, you wanted to...
I want to ask a somewhat different question, which is, have you asked the leaders of political parties how they would change their strategies if this system were adopted? I just started thinking about it, and I'm not sure. Would they run 2 candidates in every district? Then in a sense, there'd be 2 candidates for the same party competing against each other? Or would they make deals to get one? Would they try to get other parties to agree to something? Would they tell their voters, vote for only our 2 people, don't, whatever you do, give your multiple votes to others? Mm-hmm.
So actually, this is a good point, that there is extra options of a party to cast not 2 but just 1 candidate, so that there is less competition in between the candidates. In fact, it's the option for small parties. Okay, so if you are a small party and you want to have a chance to win, you do not have 2 candidates they would compete. You want only 1. So and this actually. That doesn't need to be necessarily strategic among different parties, but just for one party to cast only 1 candidate is an additional option. And if you think about it more, you can see, and this couldn't be proof yet, but that's again a logical consequence of how it works, is that in equilibrium, we would have a situation, democracy, where we would have more small parties with few representatives, because locally they can win the second seat, even though globally they might not even have 2%, not to speak about 5%. So locally they might have 1 or 2 or 1 candidate, and at the same time there is some majority effect, because it's not 1 seat, it's 2 seats, but it's only 2 people. It's not according to percentage. So the majority effect should cause, and most certainly will cause, the fact that there will be the strong parties, some of the strong parties will even strengthen. So we expect that we will have a few, let's say 2 stronger parties than now, even stronger, and more small parties with fewer representatives. And how is that possible? Well, because of the total sum must be 100%, that it means that, there will be fewer medium parties. So a medium party will either likely increase or decrease. And a good example is like the Communist Party. The D21, it would drop significantly. Not that there would be no candidate, even though with the minus vote, the Communists were total minus, but there would be districts where they would have representatives. Yeah? So this would be an example of a big drop. So as an application to the Czech Republic, it's actually a good argument, that especially for the Czech Republic, it's very strong because we would lose the block of forming government of democracy, which is now a Communist Party, has been Communist Party for the last 25 years. So that this block would lessen.
Yeah. The other thing I wonder is what the effect would be of the larger parties if they're running 2 candidates in a district. In effect, they're competing against each other. And you had a system, something like that in Japan, and it led to all these factions within the Liberal Democratic Party.
Yes, but here, because the effect of multiple votes decreases the competition in the democratic part of the political spectrum, yeah, it is likely that if the party is strong, they might use 2 candidates. It's likely to be less, in this sense, less strategic cooperation with democratic parties because there is less competition in this sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, any other questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, I'm Ingrid from Slovakia. As an international election observer, I have just one question. We will have municipal elections in Slovakia in November, so you can try to come. But my question is, can you include so-called zero vote in your project? Like, I don't vote for anybody. You can use these 4 votes, and people will participate. It's one question. And the second question, I didn't understand, do you involve the independent candidates in your project as well?
So you can, yes. So for the specific application in the Czech Republic, because you need 1,000 people to start a political party, then the reasonable threshold is 1,000 signatures to be an independent candidate. I know in Slovakia it's much more difficult, right? We have like 30,000, it's very difficult to get there. So for you, it would be a good option that you could have an independent candidate with fewer signatures than needs to be started for a political party. And with the zero vote, I'm not sure I understand. So you mean like that people would be able to say how much they are dissatisfied with the political representation? So they say like 0 vote, and you could see, okay, so now our 0 vote can increase, so we should think about it as democracy, that the situation has worsened from this point of view, or?
I think one time in Ukraine there was an option, I don't vote for anybody.
Yes.
That was the question.
Yeah, okay, sure. But then you could, of course, you can actually then you can count the voting participation in a more generalized way. So here where people come or do not come, with D21 you can say who doesn't come gives 0 votes, and those who come and use only 3 votes is 1 less, right? So in those 3/4 of the vote. So this way you can actually statistically better aim the voting participation, which would be the 0 vote, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have one question behind there.
Thank you. Andrej Schutz from NGO Masaryk Debates. I wanted to ask if you took into the consideration the strategic voting of the voters in the long term. For example, what prevents voters of the strongest party to cast all their negative votes to the second strongest party to beat the challenger, and then again all the smaller parties to cast their negative votes to the strongest party, and at the end up with the non-representative representatives who are from the smallest parties, from the parties which got around 10% of popular vote or something like that.
Okay, yes,
thank you.
Okay, thank you. There has been the original version of the voting system that I proposed was not D21, it was 2 seats, 2 plus votes and 1 minus vote. Okay, so there has been a lot of discussion about this effect of the minus vote. Notice now that the most important factor is the effect of multiple votes. So 2 seats and 4 votes. The minus vote is optional, and in fact we suggest only one of those. So then these theoretical possibilities become much weaker. It is theoretically possible that such strategy could occur. The result that we got from last year, and not only last year, from this year already, the preliminary data was that people would use this. We had 1 minus vote. We ran a test of voting, direct voting of mayors. No, mayors, yeah. Yes, mayors. The result was such that people would use the minus vote really for those who they didn't like. There was not strategic. Sure, it could be if somebody was trying to force people, explain to voters, use it against them. But now think about it. If there is a candidate or a party that says, okay, use this vote strategically to the second strongest party, it might upset a lot of people. Okay, but again, it could happen. It's 1 minus 1. The fact is that it's an option. It doesn't need to be there. And the strength of the revolution strength of D21 is independent of the minus vote. That's the most important thing. By the way, the result of elections for a mayor, Tomáš Hudeček would have won significantly with D21. But in reality, Ano was won, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're running out of time. Perhaps if there is a last question. Yes, there you are.
My name is Karel. I'm studying here in Prague. Oh, thank you. And my question is regarding the intensity of the choice, because one thing is that you have like more accurate selection with your system, but you know, now if I want to really bring up some issue like, I don't know, environment, I have to join one of the major parties, work my rank up, and get elected for the major party, because I care about that issue very much. But in your system, I can like accurately place, you know, my what I like and what I don't like and so on. But people who don't care at all have the same weight as people who do care, you know. So aren't with the weakening of the parties, don't you lose the element of caring about something and being able and ready to work for some issue or opinion or whatever?
So you mean people who don't care, like who would like to be candidates, or the voters? Are we talking about the voters or the candidates?
Now if you want to really change something, you have a bigger incentive to join a party, actually. Because,
yes, right. Because okay. In order to be a candidate, yeah. So, again, theoretically, one could argue that such a system would weaken political parties and they could even dissolve, and we could have all independent candidates, right? Well, theoretically, but in practice, we have majority voting system that not only doesn't happen, but actually the parties are very strong. Okay, and there it is even more profound. You have only one candidate per voting districts. Here you have 2. So. I mean, certainly do not expect that there could be that there will be too many independent candidates. In fact, if you look at the senator votes in the Czech Republic, we have few independent candidates, and it's the same token. There could be many more of them. So it's. It is, well, what will happen if you think about it? A political party wants to be as strong as possible, that's clear. Now we have a voting, now in the current situation we have a long anonymous list, you can do whatever you want. With D21 you have a voting district where you can choose 1 or 2 candidates, let's say 2 candidates for a strong party. How will the party choose the candidates? Clearly, the candidate must be somebody who is acceptable for public. They cannot put Kalousek as one of the candidates, or they can, but they will get net result minus. Okay, so they need to, the party will need to choose people that are reasonable, so there will be much more competition. So just this pure effect will significantly improve the quality of the candidates. I'm not saying that a bad candidate or let's say immoral person could not get into parliament. Sure could, once. But once people see that there is the guy is fishy, it will make it next time. Unlike in the parliamentary elections in the Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've run out of time, but I think we will agree with you that although this is a very complex presentation. It raises very important issues, both because we have discussed electoral system and the great personalization, therefore, of politics. You know, you can vote against somebody and against people you don't like. I still remain to be convinced about how it deals with extremism, that it diminishes extremism. And then there would be another question, is it necessarily a good thing? There are some authors who would argue that sometimes you have parties that are called populist radical extremists, and sometimes to bring them into parliament diffuses their extremism better than marginalization. That could be one type of argument.
Okay, but what about if you look at the reality? I mean, the extremism has been much stronger, right? So, I mean, the reality is somehow...
Well, I don't know. We'll see. Simply, this is one kind of argument. You know, do you diffuse radical populism by including or by pushing them to the margins? I think that still remains an open question. I will not try to conclude or sum up the debate. Simply two things. One is, whenever you want to change the electoral system, you must ask yourself what it will do to the political system as a whole. And this has been actually an interesting case in this country. Presidential election has been switched from a president elected by parliament to a president elected by direct vote. And that was for reasons most people in this room understand, because the shady deals that went on in the previous election of the last election of Václav Klaus were so scandalous, so shameful, that people, you know, there was an overwhelming case for direct election. You couldn't have all this shady dealing. What people didn't think through is what a directly elected president would do to a parliamentary constitution and the kind of tension it would bring. So you always have to think electoral system and the political system as a whole. And second thing, of course, the most difficult, is even if you have a great idea for changing the electoral system, how the hell do you push it through? How do you convince people who have benefited from the present system to reconsider, I'm not saying to do themselves out of a job, but to consider that possibility that they'll have to vote for a reform of the electoral system of which they may well be the losers. So you have a lot of persuading to do, not just of ordinary citizens or observers, but the most difficult will be to persuade the people who are actually sitting in parliament and who will have the final say on this.
So if I could quickly answer this point, actually, that's the idea is to get the political order, so to persuade citizens. So as soon as a sufficient percentage of voters do want the change, then let's example, if we are Social Democrats and 30% of the voters of Social Democrats want a change to D21, well, then the political party will be forced to do it, otherwise they will lose power. And I have communicated with some politicians in the Czech Republic. There is support among politicians for D21, but it's of course a minority. It's I'd say the more conscious politicians, and it's not that many of them. And for the change, there needs to be actually 3/5 for the constitutional change. So the only way for the application for the Czech Republic in the short future is to get support of people to get political order. And nevertheless, even if it's not in the Czech Republic as first, we are already in a process of many non-political application and others. So I believe that the strength of the argument of the results will prove itself.
Okay, the strengths of the argument and the voice of the people. Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. And thanks to Marc Plattner, who, bit like me, has found himself interested and looking at this from somewhat outside, but very, very much a very interesting proposal. Thank you to all. And we look forward to hearing more about how your proposal fares.